Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our first edition of Advocacy and Occupancy Today, a quarterly series highlighting AZLTA's current advocacy efforts and legislative priorities, as well as providing an up-to-date overview of the current state of our industry and its impact on occupancy. I'm Kim Sabo, President and CEO of the Arizona Lodging and Tourism Association, and I'm thrilled to be joined by some exceptional industry leaders for a discussion on critical issues and challenges facing our businesses as we work to stabilize and eventually rebuild in the wake of COVID-19. The U.S. hotel industry suffered its worst year on record in 2020. With an occupancy rate of just 44%, the industry surpassed 1 billion unsold room nights for the first time in history, eclipsing the 786 million that went unsold during the global financial crisis in 2009. And while leisure travel has helped to keep the lights on for some, it's important to highlight that business travel accounts for 60 to 65% of all industry revenue. A recent report from AHLA says that in 2021, business travel will still be down 85% compared with 2 years ago. And overall, the industry is bracing for years of potential pain. Travel won't return to 2019 levels until 2024. And as tough as that outlook appears, this industry continues to amaze with its perseverance and leadership, leading with solutions. Allow me to introduce my fabulous Advocacy and Occupancy series co-host, Bettina Nava. We're honored and so grateful to have Bettina serve on the AZLTA Board of Directors and as chair of our Government Affairs Committee, a committee whose mission is going to be more relevant now than ever before. Bettina is owner of OH Strategic Communications, a leading communications and public affairs firm here in Arizona. She's been in this arena for more than 25 years, possessing an extensive background in political and community strategic planning and implementation, with an emphasis in communications and coalition building around complex social issues. Bettina, thank you for joining me in this series and as we work to engage with our members and community throughout these important virtual updates.
Thank you, Kim. I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining. Next, I'd like to introduce two additional extraordinary industry leaders who are joining us, and they're going to drill down on Arizona numbers and show us where Arizona stacks up in comparison to the rest of the US and those dismal numbers that I just shared. First, we have Brent Durad. Brent serves as president and CEO of Visit Tucson, the official destination marketing organization for the city of Tucson, Pima County, and the town of Oro Valley. Brent has an extensive career in tourism promotion, including leading roles at the Scottsdale Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Greater Phoenix Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Fiesta Bowl, and the Arizona Super Bowl Host Committee. Brent most recently served as AZLTA's immediate past chair on the board of directors and continues to be involved. Well, he is immediate past chair and he continues to be involved, and he's leading our very newly formulated Southern Arizona Committee. Please also join me in welcoming current AZLTA chair of the board, Jerry Fisher. Jerry serves as executive VP for HSL Properties, a Tucson-based development company consisting of apartment communities, office and retail buildings, and globally branded hotels comprised of over 1,600 rooms throughout the Tucson metro area, including the Ritz-Carlton, Dove Mountain, and El Conquistador, a Hilton resort. AZLTA is so fortunate to have Jerry at the helm of our board of directors at this pivotal time, proactively supporting our mission to advance and advocate for Arizona's travel, tourism, sports, and hospitality industry. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us. Just before we dive into today's program, a couple of housekeeping items for the audience. Please note that the questions box at the bottom of your screen is open and the AZLTA team is diligently tracking questions. So after our presenters, our panelists make their presentations, we're going to open it up for a conversation and we're going to be pulling from the Q&A box. So please feel free to submit your questions. And without further ado, Bettina, I'd love to kick off today's program and go to you to have you provide our audience with insight into AZLTA's Government Affairs Committee and talk to us about this year's advocacy priorities and the importance of those priorities now more than ever before.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate the invite, and thank you for your leadership. I want to be effusive about you. You're a friend, you're a mentor, and being involved in this advocacy space with, I've never met more resilient people than people on this board and people who represent your membership. So it's an honor to be involved. I'm excited. And what's incredible about government relations, and it's not that this hasn't happened in the past, but not only are we prepared with the data points and the research and the spokespersons to play defense, but we are really pivoting and playing offense. And that's been in the works for quite some time, but really elevating that willingness and the resilience of this industry to come back and to come back with solutions and ideas. One thing that I've learned over the years that I've found incredible is that this ecosystem, I want to remind everybody, it's hotels, resorts, tourism attractions, professional sports teams, arts and cultures, airlines and airports, service providers, destination marketing organizations. And so the power together, if we have one unified voice and we come together, we have the ability to really hurry history and hurry the healing and the pain points that everybody has undergone in the last couple of years. My understanding is that there are really about 1,200 properties, large and small, that are comprised in this industry. And I think it's also important to point out, I think everybody always thinks of the large properties, but these are mostly small business owners. And we need to give credence to that and really help educate around the fact that, you know, often people have leveraged everything in their lives and their savings and their homes in order to make a business work here in Arizona. So I just thought that was an important point. So what is the mission of government affairs? We're going to increase awareness, show the profound impact, the fact that your industry, this industry, is really the backbone of the Arizona economy. And there's not enough people, they just think it's about sunshine and playing golf perhaps. No, this is really the backbone of the Arizona economy. And we have quite a few people that we need to educate about that. We think it's a foregone conclusion and we can't. We can make no assumptions and we're not going to. And I think also it's the strength and impact and the reach of the industry, but it's also being able to attract new members. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really look for others who need to have a voice and need to be at the table. They need to be represented. And so we should be looking for those voices to add to the cacophony of individuals that need to be represented by AZLTA. To do a little recap before we get into what the legislative priorities are, look at how the economy and the industry was rolling. If you look at 2019 and 2020, God, it was record numbers. 46.8 million overnight visitors. It blows my mind. I almost can't believe it. 25 billion in direct visitor spending, over 360 hospitality jobs, as I understand it. That's unbelievable. That is the Arizona economy. It's representative. And 3.7 billion in Arizona tax revenues. How incredible. And then COVID hits. And last year, when we look at the proactive measures that were being pursued, we saw tourism marketing authorities. I know we're going to get into the meat and potatoes in a little bit, so I don't want to go into it too much, nor am I an industry expert. But remember, this was enabling legislation, allowing conversations within the tourism ecosystem. It's voluntary, and it was really meant to be last year the framework for funding of a statewide marketing plan. That was a priority. Peer-to-peer legislation was also a priority. That was money that was added to the Arizona Sports and Tourism Authority and how there was going to be fairness and equitability in that. Additional progress was made last year. There was so much foundational work that was done. Short-term rentals, that was the establishment of legal and level playing field. That was happening and conveying the importance of investment in general. Again, we're not taking anything for granted. There's that educational piece. So COVID hit, decimated, the industry was decimated. Kim tells me, I saw numbers that said 40% of hospitality job loss just with COVID. Kim tells me that it got up to 50%, perhaps even more than that this summer. 10 billion lost in visitor spending in the first 6 months, and 312 million in total state and local revenue loss. So what a year, a lot of people in pain and under pressure. And we're not going to take that for granted. We're going to honor this, and we're going to be aggressive this session. And Kim and her team and the collaborations that she's built, it's incredible. Again, really paying honor to those people who are in pain and trying to bring our economy back. So what's on the horizon for this year? We're back to that multi-pronged approach for a sound recovery. And it starts again with TMA legislation. It's time to take on and elevate the importance here. It's an industry self-help tool. So you guys aren't sitting around saying, you know, we're looking for just simple handouts. No, it's a very proactive, solution-driven measure, which is incredible that the industry has taken it upon themselves to be incumbent upon you all to say, what can we do to be part of the solution? It's come to us in the form of Senate Bill 1101 and House Bill 2161. So remember that. You'll get more updates than you ever wanted, but those are two bills that you need to be cognizant of. Again, Senate Bill 1101 and House Bill 2161. And again, it's allowing regions and municipalities to kind of determine, or actually determine and have choice of their future. It's a repositioning tool that the industry is using. Another piece, I just want to say on that, it is moving quickly. I wish I could give a more really overview of where that legislation is, but it's moving so quickly, and it's something that we're going to track for you and make sure that you're aware of. So just be prepared to jump into action, particularly on the TMA legislation as a priority issue this year. Another key area is liability protection, Senate Bill 1377. It was, as I understand, just introduced last week. So let me emphasize, you know, your businesses are trying to act in good faith. You know that. This measure would advocate for targeted liability protections against meritless litigation. And it's, you know, we all know we need to educate people about the fact that all of you are out there trying to protect your guests and your employees. So we just need to stress that and be ready to jump into action. A third item is just general promotion, tourism awareness, and state investment. Again, not taking anything for granted, that people already know what the investment does. I actually learned on one of these webinar calls, thank you, Kim and team, that for every $10 million invested, it just doesn't simply go $10 million investment. There's $100 million return on investment that comes back. We need people, we need to be just on this campaign, repeating those numbers over and over so that people understand what's happening. So that general education of promoting tourism awareness. And then peer-to-peer, allowing the tourism industry to benefit from additional dollars being added to ASDA. That will also be a priority this year, and we're going to need your help. Legislators need to hear from employers about that. Finally, short-term rentals. As you all know, this is, again, continuing to establish level and legal playing fields for everybody. We don't want more protections. We don't want less protections. We just want a level playing field. So that's what, I'm sorry to speak so quickly, but I know that there are smart people that are industry experts on this webinar that are ready to present. Kim and team have been doing all of this. These priorities were set up in tandem with the business community. And so even though it's part of your ecosystem, it's become a broader message, whether it's the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, the Restaurant Association, major strides in coalition building, that the business community has really been educated and is embracing these priority legislative measures. So we're doing this together. And as Kim says, I'm going to steal your line, Kim. I'm sorry if you were going to work it in, but as travel goes, so goes the economy. Where do we go from here? I feel that the government relations team and the committee is here to make this turnkey for you. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but really this is supposed to be turnkey so that you can be involved. Legislators can hear from you, and the fact that you care about your employees and that you're keeping families sustained. That's the kind of action that we need, and they need to hear from your voices. So our role is really going to be to have these automated systems that go out to you so that you can be aware, kept abreast, and then we make it very turnkey for you to be involved. At this point, I am not getting into the meat and potatoes. One of the issues today that we're talking about is TMA bill and how the impact of it can be and the benefits. And here to share more is a pivotal person in Brent Durad. Thank you, Brent. You have been just such a leader on this and helping to educate us about this. And so I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can amply further educate us and let us know what we can do to help.
Bettina, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. What a great overview in terms of what our legislative priorities are for this year as well. It's going to be just vital as we move forward. And if we could go ahead and do the sharing of the presentation, that would be fantastic. Thank you. What I'll do is just kind of walk you through this bill. At the end of the presentation, we'd love to see if you have any questions that we might be able to answer. First, let me really just take a moment to thank Kim Sabo for the leadership that she has shown on this issue, not only last year, but certainly this year as well. Bettina talked about mirror bills essentially that are making their way through the House and the Senate at this point. So we've got Senate Bill 1101 and then House Bill 2161. These are the same bill, but just in terms of trying to get these bills through the process as quickly as possible, what we're doing is running them simultaneously through those chambers. At some point, those bills will merge, become one, and then hopefully go to the governor's desk for signature. Many of you may recall that this effort started in earnest last year. We were really making very fast progress with it as well. Last year it was Senate Bill 1335, which was the Tourism Marketing Authorities, made it through the Senate very quickly and was also proceeding very rapidly through the House. It was on the House floor for a vote, and COVID-19 shut down the session probably maybe 2 to 3 hours before it was going to be voted on the House floor. So anyway, we had great momentum last year. That's carried over to this year. It's been terrific to see. And anyway, let's move on to the next slide, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the mechanics of this as well. So TMAs, for us, it's a little bit unique in terms of the authority concept. Most of these are known as either tourism improvement districts, TIDs, or tourism business improvement districts, TBIDs, which is listed up there as well. You can see more than 180 of those exist right now. Most are in California, but they're throughout 17 states at this point. Additionally, Massachusetts just approved TBID legislation, I believe about 30 days ago. And so Boston is working rapidly to make sure that Massachusetts is the 18th state. We've got TMAs under consideration in 9 states right now. Arizona is one of those, obviously. And again, the mechanics of this, we'll just start with this, is that it's an assessment on guest rooms. So for hotels and resorts that participate in a tourism marketing authority, they add an assessment to that overall checkout scenario. And then that revenue, much like bed tax would, it goes to the Arizona Department of Revenue and then back to the respective municipality or county. Then they distribute that. It's a pass through to the actual authority itself. We do have a fact sheet at azlta.com. It's in the advocacy section there as well. And that would give you all the details that you might need. Next slide, please. So looking at, this is really a partnership out there as the slide indicates. So you've got destination marketing organizations. They would be the entities that actually operate the tourism marketing authorities, but they're going to have to enter into an agreement, a petition with the governments that are in play along with the hoteliers as well. So it's going to take some time to make this happen. We really think that if we can get the legislation approved this session, it's probably most likely going to be early 2022 before we see any tourism marketing authorities in place. It just depends on just some of the variables with the timing that comes up. Probably the biggest point on here, it just comes back to local control. At the end of the day, these are dollars that are generated locally. They go through a little bit of a circuitous process, but they come back to the local jurisdiction, and that destination marketing organization has additional dollars then that they can use for marketing, sales, and promotion to help bring more people into the marketplace. Next slide, please. So we look at the benefits. Again, these are tailored objectives that we're able to reach. Because the hoteliers are so involved in this process, and DMO boards will be actually the entities overseeing it, you're going to see a lot of input there in terms of how are these dollars utilized to actually bring people into Arizona, and not Arizona as a whole, but more specifically into those local jurisdictions. Again, locally generated dollars, local control from that standpoint there as well. The biggest benefits to the state and frankly to the municipalities and the counties that take part in this, certainly more jobs, but really more tax revenue as well, and without raising taxes. So when you take a look at the state of Arizona, again, a 5.5% sales tax on room revenue, and then 5.6% on retail. So the more visitors that we can bring into these marketplaces, certainly the more state revenue that comes in, and it'll generate local revenue as well. Next slide, please. When we look at TMAs, again, it's a two-step process. I actually think step one is going to be a little bit easier than step two, but we do have to get the enabling legislation through. I'll reiterate it again at the end, but it's really important over the next week or so that we reach out to members of the House and Senate and ask them to support these bills. We can't take this for granted. We have to do everything that we can to get this legislation passed so that we can start the recovery process for our industry. And then you're going to see, again, DMOs, we need to engage with the partners. We need to talk to the municipalities, the counties, the hoteliers. We have to make sure that this makes sense for our jurisdictions, because remember, this is enabling legislation. If it passes, it doesn't mean you have to create a tourism marketing authority, but it gives you that ability. It gives you that additional opportunity to go out and control your own destiny. Next slide, please. And again, we talked about the enabling aspect of it. DMOs, they do govern the tourism marketing authorities. There's a petition process in place. And it's really important to note that this is meant to augment and not supplant the funding that's coming in. There'll be a poison pill built in to disestablish a district if necessary. But this, just because we create a TMA doesn't mean that our existing underlying funding goes away. It has to remain in place so that we can get out there and really continue to compete for business. And the assessments are going to be in dollars, not in percentages as we move forward as well. And that just goes back to Arizona law, and it ties back into the authority concept versus a district. Next slide, please. When we look at just some of the mechanics and the specifics of this, the tiered assessments. So for example, if you have a resort that's charging $400 a night and a property, a lower end property that might be more in the $50, $60 per night range, they probably shouldn't be charging the same assessment out there. And so what we want to take a look at is how do we tier that based on room rates is one aspect of it. You can carve out, maybe there's a specific geographic segment or other segment that you need to carve out of your district. This is meant to create a lot of flexibility and to really just help the industry instead of hinder in any way. Multi-jurisdictional TMAs are okay. So for example, in Tucson, I would probably look at bringing in Pima County, City of Tucson, and Town of Laurel Valley. So a county, two different municipalities with the DMO as well. 10 years is the limit, and they can be reauthorized. And certainly with a vote of 50% of the rooms within the district, you can vote to disestablish. It'll take a higher threshold to actually create the TMA. So once you establish your geographic boundaries, owners of 67% of the rooms within that authority area have to sign off on this before a TMA is created. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at this on the Senate side. Again, our thanks to Senators Pace and Bowie. Once again this year, last year, they co-sponsored the Tourism Marketing Authority bill. They're doing so again this year. Again, Senator Pace and Bowie, they were both involved with the Senate Commerce Committee. We were able to get the bill through that committee by an 8-1 vote on January 27th. It'll go to the Rules Committee. Bettina talked about how fast these bills are moving, and that's certainly the case. We think that, again, in terms of getting through Senate rules, that probably would happen early next week. It'll go to, again, the Democratic Republican caucuses at that point. Then it would go to, again, the Committee of the Whole, COW, as it's known, or basically a floor debate in both the House and Senate. Next slide, please. looking at HB 2161, it's moving a little bit more quickly. And so it actually made it through the Rules Committee by an 8-0 vote. So that was great news there. Democratic caucus has already debated it. So again, early next week, that's going to go to the Republican caucus and should hopefully make it to the House floor for debate and possibly even a vote next week. So that's why it's just essential that we reach out to our legislators starting again this afternoon and continuing well into next week. Let's make sure that they hear from our industry in terms of the importance of these bills in terms of our overall recovery. Next slide, please. And again, so what this comes back to, I would encourage everybody, again, just if you've got questions about the bill, azledge.gov. That's a great website where you can track the bill's progress on there as well. azlta.com. Again, the fact sheet's loaded there. You can see the hundreds of businesses and different companies that have signed on in support of these bills. But let's not take this for granted. Let's try to push this forward. Again, these are dollars that are really going to help us recover and bring back a lot of these jobs that have been lost. With that, I really thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brent. I think it's me. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you, Brent, really, for your tireless efforts and helping to educate us about this. And just there's so many voices at the table here, and you're such an inclusive person and have been such a great leader on this issue. So I wanted to express appreciation for that and leading this conversation and just working so hard to put people back to work. At this point now, I have the pleasure of introducing Jerry Fisher. And hi, Jerry. It was great catching up with you earlier today.
Good morning, how are you? Or afternoon, I should say.
I know. What time is it? Jerry's going to educate us about RevPAR, and this has really been a climb for me. So I'm learning a lot here. Jerry, we're so grateful. He serves as our esteemed chairman for AZLTA and obviously represents HSL. And I just wanted to say the contributions of HSL, not only in Southern Arizona, but in Arizona as a whole. You're a major employer, and the people that you're taking care of, you have a lot of soul. So we appreciate you, and I pass the baton to you to learn more.
Bettina, thank you so much. And thank you to the two other great colleagues on the call today. So I think today what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and talk about sort of the current state of where the Southern Arizona occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR stand as of this first quarter of 2021. And I know that Bettina and Kim were drilling into some of those numbers, and hopefully we'll drill down a little bit further to try to show you the current state and path forward, if you will. But I think we should start really at looking at where we have been. And I think if we could go to the next slide, please. You know, memories fade quickly, and I really wanted to bring this back to the marketplace. If you look at the Tucson market, there's approximately 16,000 rooms in the MSA, and that's growing, and we're glad to hear that. But if you look at that 2020 full year breakdown of all the hotels in the market, we had a RevPAR of $75.64. And then if you take it and split it out to the upper priced hotels, that RevPAR number was $104.85. Mid-price hotels had a healthy RevPAR of $78.88. And I think it's critical to note, and Kim mentioned it earlier in the call, that if you look at 2019 numbers, where we were at year end and where the trajectory was headed for 2020 and 2021, we were absolutely poised to reach levels that we have not seen since 2007. And I think everyone was optimistic for the future in really all segments of the hotel business, whether it be a small mom and pop operation, if you will, as Bettina noted, someone that put their life's blood and work into a small hotel. Everyone was very optimistic as we headed into 2020. Go to the next slide, please, if we could. And I think this, unfortunately, is the bad news, as Kim stated earlier. 2020 was really the year of reckoning for our industry. And again, this is a focus on Southern Arizona, Tucson MSA hotels. And I know that other hotels, in the Valley and Northern Arizona and Southern Arizona, Western Arizona, they experienced these kind of numbers and maybe greater decreases. But I think it's really telling when you look at the all hotels for the full year that we had a RevPAR number. The dollar amount certainly is important to look at, but that representation of a 40.7% decrease year over year, and really the lion's share of that decrease happened in the last 3 quarters of the year, and we're still experiencing that today. The upper priced hotels, I think it's of note, they were the hardest hit, if you will. The larger group hotels were down 53% year over year. And I think it's very interesting as we move forward in our path forward. We can't forget about group travel, because that's what drives our business in this state. And right now, unfortunately, the near-term future does not look very bright for group hotels. I think everyone can remember where they were the day that the governor put the order in place for everyone to stay at home. And I can tell you, as a hotelier that has small hotels from Hampton Inns to large 5-star resorts like Ritz-Carlton's, we saw business drop off the map immediately. And then when you move to the first week of February, or excuse me, March of last year, 2020, all of our large group hotels, we saw hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds and thousands of group rooms just disappear overnight, which was certainly a shocking. I think we were all in a state of shock at that time. But I think the human factor was as important as the monetary factor. And I'll give you a sense from our perspective. As Kim mentioned, we have and own 1,600 rooms in the city of Tucson, in the county. We employ 2,000 people as of the end of February 2020. And at the end of March 2020, we had 900 associates. We had, it was just incredibly, I think it represents about north of 60% of our associates we had to furlough. And I think it's also critical as we come out of this to understand that much of that, those associates, whether it be our company or throughout the state, those folks have not been rehired because we have not had the ability to bring back a full force as much as we'd like to. We've grown a bit in the fourth quarter of 2020, but those are real human factors, and people that don't have childcare, they're at home, they don't have their income. There were many people in the state that were hard hit, but no one harder hit than our industry, and it continues that way, unfortunately. So if we could go to the next slide. If we look at sort of the path forward or this year, these numbers really come from our industry leaders, and these numbers are Tucson centric. They're specific to Tucson. So you see on these numbers that we're having a nice little increase in occupancies and a tick up in average rates through all the tiers, all the upper priced and mid priced hotels. But I would say there's a huge caveat to this. When these numbers were drafted, no one had a crystal ball, and these numbers were drafted in the fall and winter of 2020. And much of it was based on, quite frankly, maybe a quicker rollout of a vaccine. And so we are seeing some business come back. And if we could go to that next slide, please. Here's how we really see the first quarter in our market. And through the first month even of 2021, we've seen this parallel with the forecasts. We're seeing a bit of that individual traveler and that individual business traveler come back. It's still stagnant. It really hasn't moved the needle, but we're seeing a bit of that move. And we think that in the second quarter of 2021, that travel will slowly regain some of that momentum. I think if you look through the first and second quarters, the critical piece to look at again is that there's virtually no group business in Tucson, with regard to citywides, et cetera. And I know that we'll be getting into some questions, hopefully after the presentations, but I can tell you from a Tucson market, even the small operators, we've had citywide conventions in the first quarter of 2021 that have been canceled and quite frankly have devastated the local economy, that sell out and compress the market each first quarter of the year. And I know a lot of operators went back and rejiggered their budgets for this year because they got caught off guard. All these decisions seem to happen on a day-to-day basis, and we literally have been managing our revenue piece and process on a day-to-day basis. But the impact, I think, on the small operators, the mom and pops that rely on that compression of the market is really telling, and it's going to be concerning throughout the year. We do anticipate the individual business traveler will come back a little bit more robust in quarter 3 of 2021. And then we'll see a bit of that group pace performance come back in the fourth quarter of 2021 to attain maybe a 75% level of 2019. And again, I would be cautious on those numbers because as we're seeing, we're not seeing the group cancel their events for fourth quarter. So that's a good sign. That's a positive sign. But we're also not seeing a ton of new business on groups booking for the fourth quarter. So I think it's kind of a neutral play at this point. And I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say, when we look at 2020 as a whole and what we've gone through to date as an industry, Kim's mentioned on several telecasts and in meetings and with the press that our business was impacted by $10 million last year. And I would argue, a state that much of its seasonality, we have high seasons in the first and fourth quarters of the year. I would argue if we had this COVID pandemic hit us 60 days prior to when it did and when it was announced, we could have seen numbers well in north of $15 billion in losses. So I think that's critical that, really that first quarter of 2020 made the $10 billion loss look a little bit better than it really would have been. So next slide, please. I mean, I think it's a 2-line summation, but I think at the end of the day, if you look at where we're expecting the mid-priced hotel segment to come back and reach 2019 RevPAR levels, we're really looking, and that's optimistically looking at the end of 2022. And then with the upper priced hotels, the big group houses, the expectation is you attain 2019 RevPAR numbers by the end of 2023, first quarter of 2024. And, looking out that far and understanding, how long we've already been in this pandemic and how businesses have suffered, I think it's a tough pill to swallow for many that we're not going to get back to these levels for 2, 3, 4 years from the start of that pandemic. And if there is not significant assistance and investment in our industry from a state level, I fear that there's not going to be a lot of operators that will be able to hang on through this time. While I think from a vaccine perspective, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and there's certainly optimism when you talk to people, and that's a great sign. We need that optimism. But I would argue that our business across the board is not going to markedly improve in 2021. And with that, I think that's my presentation. I would love to take questions when appropriate.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry. Really appreciate your insight and sharing numbers relative to Southern Arizona. Brent, thank you for the tremendous overview on the Tourism Marketing Authority legislation. And Bettina, your insights and wisdom with regard to government affairs and sort of a strategy that we can implement moving forward to quarterback us out of this situation. As Jerry mentioned, literally overnight, at our high season nearly a year ago, our occupancy numbers fell off a cliff. Our revenues stopped almost instantaneously, and our businesses were forced to furlough and lay off employees. So we went into immediate triage mode, and we've really been working hard to stabilize the patient, if you will. We've been in this stabilizing the patient mode for quite some time. Having said that, again, as I mentioned earlier, there are solutions, and this industry is presenting solutions for our to stabilize the patient and then hopefully get the patient into recovery. And again, at the top of that list is tourism marketing authorities. And each of you mentioned how uniquely positioned each community is within the state. And that's the beauty of the tourism marketing authorities, is that each community can develop an authority marketing plan relative to their respective needs, challenges, and opportunities. So we received a number of questions, and I do want to start off talking about going back to the TMAs. And Brent, I'll kick it back to you, but we have a question. How can our members get involved in helping push this tourism marketing authority legislation across the goal line this year? We were right there last year. We want to get across the goal line this year.
Yeah, the most important thing that we can do, again, the legislators, they're hearing from our lobbyists, including Kim, a great deal. I mean, they're hearing everything there, but it's really important that those of us who would be directly involved in the mechanics of this, whether you're, again, a hotelier with a DMO, for example, even in terms of, on the local government side too, or perhaps even on the county front, having some conversations with legislators if you feel like that this is a concept that might work for you in your community or region. It just comes back to ensuring that those legislators hear from us and that they understand the importance of trying to rebuild our industry, and then having a funding source that would be in place through a period of time that would allow us. Here in Tucson, we might take a look at backstopping a flight to New York. We may take a look at, you can't use it for infrastructure, but you can use it for, again, placemaking and other types of things that might really benefit. For us, we think that also on the marketing and sales front, if we're going to, again, compete coming out of this pandemic, we want the resources necessary to be able to get out there and ensure that we get our fair share coming into Arizona.
Thank you. Agree entirely. And Bettina, in your remarks, you talked about the calls to action that we send out on a regular basis, and how important it is for our policymakers to hear from their respective constituents with regard to how this is impacting their businesses, how it's impacting the employees that they may have once employed. How do we get these employees, back to work? And again, I submit that TMAs is one way in which we can do that. It's our industry self-help tool. But Bettina, if you could talk a little bit more and give our viewers a little more concrete direction. I send out these calls to action and sort of barrage everybody with these emails, but explain sort of the processes that our stakeholders can go to and really get engaged.
So look, everyone, we get it. You get 1,000 emails a day, and it can be long and it can be pedantic. Sorry, they're coming your way. And our goal is to make them even more turnkey for you. So to have talking points on there so that when you do reach out to your legislators, those talking points will be turnkey and right in front of you. There'll be language on there that you can cut and paste into emails. Kim always provides points of contact. So it's an in district, doing your part to realize, what district am I in, who's representing me. And if you don't know, call me. 602-228-0105. I'll help you figure it out. 602-228-0105. It's a shameless commercial. But also the RTS system. Raise your hand if you're on the RTS system. That really matters. Good job, Kim. The request to speak and what that system is. And again, I'll do it myself as government relations. Our team will help go down to the legislature and help you with this. It's signing you up. It takes about 5 minutes on a kiosk that's at the legislature. I will do it for you, so there's no excuse. Get your information, and then that way you can just automatically go online and you can say, I'm in favor of a bill, I'm against a bill, and you can also add in comments. There might be times where not only do we ask you to call and write to legislators, but maybe a request to speak in committee. I don't know if that's going to happen, but just being readily available, those calls to action, I know, again, it seems cumbersome, but they really do matter because you're the employers, and those pain points need to be shared about who you're trying to protect and serve. Long answer, sorry.
No, fantastic answer and very insightful and helpful. And I hope you all wrote down Bettina's number. She's expecting calls and ready to assist.
Ready to go.
I'd love to sort of shift gears and talk about the vaccinations. I think we're hearing a lot about the vaccinations and the rollout and how that's going to help rebuild that consumer confidence. Jerry, I'd love to go to you from a hotelier's perspective. What do the vaccinations look like and mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, for our industry, it's going to be crucial for our folks to get vaccinated so that they can be out there healthy and serve the community. It's interesting from a rollout perspective. It seems like it's different in every county throughout the state. Here in Pima County, we wish that we were a little bit more accelerated, but they have done a nice job. I think as of today, they've gotten north of 700,000 doses out and are expecting another 1.5 million this week. So we are hopeful in Tucson that this process accelerates, both for certainly our workers to allow them to be healthy and confident, but also that guest coming into the hotel. So I think as we move through the year, that confidence will build on both sides, and I think we'll see an increase in occupancies.
Absolutely, we are certainly hoping so. One thing, Jerry, that you had mentioned earlier is leisure versus business travel. And while leisure travel has really enabled many of our properties and businesses to keep the light on, the real hit and the real margins are in the business travel, where we're losing these groups, conventions, events. Brent, I'd love to shift to you to talk about that. For example, Tucson hosts the International Gem Show every year. How is the loss of event revenue and business impacting Tucson?
Yeah, again, COVID-19 has struck in many unfortunate ways. And when it comes to events, that's probably the perfect example for Tucson. So the Tucson Gem, Mineral, and Fossil Showcase, typically it's a 16-day event. Last year, we had more than 50 gem shows that operated, and it would be happening right now. What's happened is we still have 6 smaller shows that have received approval from the Pima County Health Department to be able to proceed. They're proceeding right now. The bulk, and we're looking at about 24 shows, have moved to April. And again, that's dependent upon being able to get approvals from the Pima County Health Department. For us, what we see in a typical gem show year is about 130 million or so in direct spending. That's not an economic impact number, but direct spending. And these are from visitors from all 50 states and several countries who come in for the show annually. When you take a look at that lack of spending, that's going to have a huge impact, obviously, out there as well. A lot of that spending is on hotels and lodging, but it's also on retail, it's restaurants, and other types of activities as well. So just a huge impact. Going back to the meetings front as well, for us to be able to get meetings on the books, I mean, we've rebooked some meetings 2 and 3 times in some cases. It seems like the line of demarcation is October 1st right now for whatever reason. We've had 2 or 3 of those lines through the course of this pandemic, but right now we've got meeting planners betting on October as being a safe time frame to begin to build back events. For us, it's going to take, as Jerry mentioned, well into 22 and probably into 23 before we get back to the numbers in 2019.
And Brent, let's hope that it's that soon and not what AHLA is predicting in the recent study that they released, where it cites business travel really not getting back to 2019 levels until 2024 and possibly beyond. I would like to sort of stay on this topic of group travel and as it pertains to reestablishing consumer confidence. Again, this is an area where, despite how decimated the industry has been, we have led with solutions. And I will talk about the AZ Safe and Clean initiative that we created in partnership with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. And that was AHLA getting together with all of the national brands and the CDC and coming up with a list of guidance, protocols, criteria that our properties and attractions could self-assess and adhere to, and then get a decal to begin this consumer confidence rebuilding campaign, if you will. Don't mean to skip over Bettina, but I am going to shift to Jerry, because I know, Jerry, that your properties are indeed AZ Safe and Clean certified, and would love to just get your input on that important element of reestablishing consumer confidence and what it means to business.
Sure, I appreciate the question. I think that the AZ Safe and Clean program has been simply phenomenal for our hotels. And why I say that is that if you think about what we went through the summer of this past year, we were lucky enough in Arizona to maybe not be as shut down as other states. And what we saw was an influx from California and other, sort of border states, if you will, of travelers that wanted to come in for staycations and really get away and with their family and be safe, and maybe they quarantine in their room or, out at the pool, et cetera, in small group settings. But I think what it really did for us is that it gave the guest confidence when they came to our hotel, that they were assured that the hotel took every precaution possible to make their stay the safest it could be. And I think that really paid off for Arizona and certainly, Tucson.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we've really done a great job of positioning the state and our businesses. And again, as you mentioned, this is an industry that is the most public-facing, consumer-facing industry, where we're welcoming visitors, and we want to ensure that not only our visitors are safe and healthy, but our employees, a critical component of each and everything we do. I would love to sort of parlay this into something that I think is perfect with this panel, particularly with Brent as the destination marketing organization for virtually all of Southern Arizona, and talk about the importance of our international visitors. What our Mexican visitors mean to our economy and vice versa. Could you talk about our international visitors?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. And when we take a look at the border closures to non-essential travel that happened for the past several months and are still in place right now based on the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really had a really negative impact, obviously, on the economy here in Southern Arizona. We'll typically see tens of thousands of travelers from Mexico, come into Southern Arizona on a daily basis. When we take a look at especially the sales tax revenue associated with those visitors, we're missing that in a huge way right now. In addition, obviously, to the room stays, but the sooner we can get the borders, both Mexico and Canada, reopened to a non-essential travel, if you will, the better, I think, for all of us. Ironically, you can still fly over the borders as a non-essential traveler, but you can't drive over. And so we're looking to rectify that as soon as we can. We need those visitors back and spending money and enjoying themselves throughout the entire state of Arizona, especially based on, again, Representative Stanton's recent bill that allows that travel throughout the state.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be critical. Really, really exciting that was indeed in this last round of stimulus dollars. And I think that the entirety of the state is going to see benefit from that. So stay tuned on that. But just building on the AZ Safe and Clean, I will give this AZLTA team a plug. And talking about our Mexican visitors, I will tell you, we are working diligently hand in hand with our neighbors to the south on creating a safe and clean corridor. So stay tuned on that, but work is indeed being done to ensure visitors that the region is indeed safe and clean, and that we are all adhering to these elevated standards, which again, we all know this industry is the gold standard for health, safety, and cleanliness anyway, but we're just taking it a step further. I'd love to go back to Bettina. And Bettina, again, your years of experience with strategic communications and planning, we couldn't be luckier to have you in the seat that you're in as our chair of government affairs. I think you're going to be a game changer. And I'd love for you to talk about sort of the next step, not only answering the calls to action, but in order to elevate this industry into the future and elevate it to the level that it deserves to be respected and acknowledged with regard to the economic engine and driver that it is. Can you talk a little bit about ways in which we as an industry can band together and sort of help position ourselves to get the assistance and recognition, I guess is a good word, that I think that we need?
Well, I want to shamelessly plug that I have some angel on this call, whether it's public funding or private funding. This is an investment. I wish you had $5 million for a public education campaign. But I think that one thing that can be done is different properties and association members, whatever space they may be in, is really pushing out what you're talking about on AZ Safe and Clean. The fact that people in this association and industry took it upon themselves not to do just what the CDC said, not just to do what AZ Safe and Clean is recommending, but to go above and beyond. And everybody needs to be, there needs to be voices saying that, whether it's opinion leaders or the general public, everyone needs to be pushing out. It's the gold standard. We didn't do the status quo. We went above and beyond and explaining that to folks. Not only do I hope you get a $5 million check for a public education campaign and have these properties, educating people about what they're doing to stay safe. I think it's also important, just to join hands together. And on a national level, we even need to be federally educating people about what you're doing. So using some of your marketing dollars, whatever's left, just to talk about going above and beyond and not staying within the status quo.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. And I will tell you, panelists, we've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to transition into the lightning round. And I'd really just love to hear, again, in the midst of what this industry is experiencing with COVID-19, unprecedented challenges, I'd love for you to leave the audience with one thought. What do you think is going to have the biggest impact, be of most benefit to this industry in getting to recovery? And Jerry, I'll start with you.
Well, I would tell you is probably the blinding flash of the obvious, but it's the vaccine right now. I mean, we're so dependent on not just Arizona being safe, but really with the groups and those decision makers for the groups. They're coming from all over the world. And so I think, really having a proactive approach, not only in the United States, but hopeful that, our inbound travel from outside the United States, those countries are marching quickly to vaccines, because that's the only thing that's going to bring back that group business at a more rapid pace.
Brent, I'm going to transition to you, your closing thoughts.
The 2 V's, vaccines and vigilance. What's going to happen is, again, the vaccines are going to start to bring back customers, but we're going to go through kind of a really weird transitional time where you're going to have maybe 30–40% of the population that's vaccinated, and you may have another 10 to 20% out there that claim they're vaccinated and not. So AZ Safe and Clean remains a really viable, necessary program for us throughout this next year. We have to continue to stay safe and again, the clean aspects of it as well in terms of the properties, attractions. Are you safe to get into a taxi or an Uber, whatever the case may be. So the vigilance along with the vaccines, I think that's what we need over the next year.
I like that, the 2 V's, vigilance and vaccines. And shameless plug, if your property is not AZ Safe and Clean certified, please contact our team. We can help you get there. Please contact our team and I think our contact information is there on the advocacy and occupancy screen. I'm going to close by thanking my amazing co-host, Bettina Nava, who is again an extraordinary leader, and we're so blessed to have her at the helm of government affairs. But before I go to Bettina for your closing thoughts, Jerry, thank you again, our current chair, and Brent, your 3 years of tireless dedication and service as chair, so greatly appreciated. We could not have a better trio leading us right now. I feel blessed. You make my job so much easier. And with that, I'm going to kick it to my amazing co-host and let her close it out.
I love you, Kim. This organization does, I mean, really, it's just amazing what you do with just so few people on your team. And shots in arms, and let's work together, and maybe we can pull down some dollars, whether it's privately or publicly. It'd be great for the state to invest more in the work that you're doing. And so let's work together to be proactive about it. I've never met more resilient people. So thank you for letting me to be involved.
Thank you. Thanks again to each of our panelists. With that, it's a wrap. Again, thank you for joining our first quarterly Advocacy and Occupancy Today webinar. Our next will be in May, so stay tuned for that date. It'll be coming to you shortly. Until then, look for your calls to action. Call the members of the legislature, your respective representatives and senators. Help us out. Help us get this TMA legislation over the goal line this year, because this is going to help us rebuild and get our people back to work. So with that, thank you. We will see you again soon.